Eunsung's story. Content warning: suicide. I was born in South Korea and grew up in a rural area near the demilitarized zone. Overall, I had a happy childhood, but I also had to endure several episodes of violence and trauma. It is only through the healing of recovery and living a spiritual life that I can look back with joy and have compassion for my family and the generations of people who had to experience the suffering of living in that impoverished and war-torn area. When I was in the 3rd grade, my family immigrated to the mountains of Appalachia in North Carolina. I already felt different before coming to the United States, but when I arrived, I really felt out of place. I experienced what it was like to be othered. Due to the racism prevalent in the area, I felt isolated and unsafe at school and around town. When I got drunk and high for the first time, none of the heaviness of what I was experiencing mattered anymore. The name-calling and stares from other kids faded away. I felt like I could breathe deeply for the first time. I was painfully shy, and alcohol and drugs gave me the power to connect with others. I never thought substances would take me to a dark place. The tragedy of addiction was that what I thought was a solution to my suffering would eventually create more suffering for myself and my loved ones. I first found meditation when I was in college and read a neat little book on Taoist alchemy. I meditated for the first time, visualizing a golden egg melting down my body. I still drank and got high, even while meditating. I can see now that I was using meditation as another escape. I wasn't at peace with my present reality. I always ran. The next few years were a blur. After I graduated college, I worked as a wilderness camp counselor. One day, I had an alcohol-induced epiphany. I thought, if this is all there is to life, then screw it. I'm going to kill myself. But I also thought that I would like to see New Mexico before I died. Instead of driving back to work, I started driving west to Mount Taylor in New Mexico. I walked out into the woods thinking I would have some grand spiritual experience. I didn't find enlightenment, but I did decide to not give up on life that day. I didn't get into recovery then. It would take multiple suicide attempts, lots of punk shows, and more aimless wandering before I found my way to healing. I still meditated periodically, and I found some peace in Buddhist communities. But I am not sure if my sitting against a wall doing zazen eventually led me to where I am now. I was lost, and it felt like I was always aimlessly pursuing a new relationship or going to a new place to quiet the discomfort I felt on the inside. I lost relationships and career opportunities due to drugs and alcohol. It was a bit of a blur, but during this period, I made multiple attempts at taking my life, and none of them were successful. I felt so empty. I was lost in dukkha. I was living with my father and helping out at his church. I thought maybe I could bring anarchist philosophy into Christianity and wake up the boys I taught in Bible study. So I went to a prestigious grad school in North Carolina and tried to appear spiritual. I also got involved with the Buddhist community at the school, and I led the morning sits on a regular basis. I was studying theology, interning at churches, leading youth groups, preaching, and leading prayer groups. I felt fake as I lived a double life. I was studying how to be a spiritual leader to others, while I was hungover and miserable in my own life. I was not able to practice what I preached. I thought that if people could see how I really felt on the inside and the life I led, they would all reject me. At this time, my physical health started to deteriorate quickly as well. I left graduate school with a degree and lived and worked at an interfaith community in Washington, D.C., where people with and without intellectual disabilities shared life together. I once again lived a double life. I spent days being with people in a community that taught me to embrace my vulnerability, but at night I would numb my feelings by drinking. In the beginning, I would go out to bars in my neighborhood with friends, but toward the end, I preferred drinking alone in my basement. Once again, my addiction led me to self-harm and suicidal thoughts. It was at that dark moment that I finally admitted to someone that I might have a problem. I finally got into recovery in October 2011. It hasn't been a perfect journey, but I am grateful for each moment and each day. I got clean initially through 12-step programs, but meditation was vital to my recovery. I had to relearn to meditate when I got clean. Sometimes, staring at a lit candle to start my day was the only peace I had from the chaos of my thoughts. I moved to Virginia in 2014. At the time, I was married and expecting the birth of a daughter. I got connected to the recovery community in a new place and kept meditating and walking the path as best I could. I would sometimes meditate with my daughter sleeping on my chest, feeling her breath against mine. It truly is an amazing gift to be a parent in recovery. I like to tell people that I found my way to Buddhist recovery by accident. I asked a friend from a 12-step group to start an 11th step meeting with me, and they declined, but instead asked me if I wanted to start a refuge recovery meeting. I had never heard of a recovery program that utilized Buddhist principles. In June 2014, we held our first meeting. Ever since then, my sangha has been vital to my recovery. Especially when I went through a divorce, the meetings became a safe place for me to just sit in silence and fall apart. In 2019, I went to the Refuge Recovery Annual Conference in Chicago, and it felt like all hell had broken loose. I was in shock going to my first Buddhist recovery conference and walking into division. It turned out that was the pivotal moment Recovery Dharma was born. I remember reading a draft of the Recovery Dharma book on the L train on my way to the airport to head back home. It felt like my heart was connecting with each word. I could feel not just one individual voice speaking to me, but a group of people sharing their experience and practice. A few people from my local sangha attended the conference in Chicago with me, and we brought back our experience and shared why it was so vital that our sangha transition to Recovery Dharma. Shortly after that, all of the meetings in our area voted to switch from Refuge to RD. I thought all the turmoil and chaos would be over, but little did I know another storm was coming. My local sangha was based in a city full of Confederate monuments, and it would be the epicenter of protests in the aftermath of George Floyd's murder in the middle of the COVID-19 pandemic. The monuments fell, and I had my practice to guide me so I could skillfully listen to my conscience without causing more suffering to myself and others. Some of my sangha's members died from overdose or addiction-related health reasons. It was a strange time, and I am still processing all the grief and loss. I decided to start another Recovery Dharma group online, and I facilitated and participated in inquiry circles. I tried to help others and live by the Four Noble Truths and the Eightfold Path. My life today is one of increased connection and hope. As a hospice chaplain and grief counselor, I use my practice to be present and help others pass through times of transition and loss. I try to touch my own pain and the suffering of others with compassion. I try to see the beauty all around me in the small moments. Whether I am surfing a wave, going for a walk with my daughter, or even just sitting in traffic, I try to stay present. I focus on my breath and recognize that I can mindfully breathe through any change, and I can help others to do the same. In these ways, I continue to help myself and others through my practice. I practice when life gets hard, and I also practice when life gets good. Buddhism and RD have given me a strong foundation, so I am empowered to transform my own life in a skillful way. I have taken on a lot of responsibility in the RD community, and lately my work has been preparing others to be peer leaders and doing so with compassion. I have found new meaning and purpose in Buddhist recovery and a path that helps me be present to life. I hope my story guides someone who is lost and searching for the three jewels, Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. And remember, you don't have to walk this path alone. May you be happy. May you be at ease. May you be free from suffering.